Good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. It is Friday, September 9th at 10:39 a.m. Purdue's preparing to play Indiana State tomorrow, Saturday, September 10th at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. kickoff. But I'm not a big fan of games versus FCS foes. I don't think Purdue's athletic department has been big fans of them either in recent years. We haven't seen as much of this in the last couple of years. And these games, you come into them, and the FBS team doesn't have much to gain and it has a ton to lose. They're really good for college football in that those FCS teams obviously get a payout. It always makes me laugh when you pay a school 250,000, 500,000, whatever, and still lose, which happened a couple times last weekend, I think, in college football. And Jeff Brom has been very clear. He's very aware that this is a possibility for Purdue, and I think he's been drilling it into the players' heads that they should be ready for anything, be ready for Indiana State to be dialed in. Think about, I mean, how big these games must be for those players. Obviously, there's a talent disparity, but the other thing is, if you were passed over by your favorite team that you grew up with, I can think of a bunch of examples, but specifically, there's a kid on Indiana State. He's from Lafayette, Indiana. I don't know if he wanted to go to Purdue or not. He's a running back. He's a freshman. But a guy like that really, really wants to beat Purdue and show out in front of his family. I'm sure I'll have a bunch of people there. I don't think he even played last week. Indiana State played three different running backs. But yeah, those type of players, this is a big deal. And so Purdue better be ready. I don't care who you play, you better be ready, but you better be ready when you're playing a team like Indiana State. If you don't know your Indiana State facts, Indiana State was they won last week versus North Alabama. They won 17-14, and I mean, not much jumps out of the stat page for me. I looked over a little bit, and I'll look over a little bit more right now. But they spread the ball around. I mean, they had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 receivers catch the ball, but only had 140 yards passing. Quarterback was just over 50% completion percentage, much like O'Connell, but he had one touchdown, two interceptions. His name's Gavin Screws. Good name. But the other thing, Indiana State's running backs did a pretty decent job. I think they're carrying the ball for about 4 yards a carry. So Purdue needs to be ready. So if you want to know, it's tough to find context when your favorite team is playing a team that you don't watch, you don't see much from. But here's some context. Indiana State is 39th in the FCS rankings. North Alabama is 90th. I think these polls are pretty unscientific at this point, but that's one of the polls that I found. So take it for what it's worth. Indiana State, the last time they played Purdue, we were reminded about this on the Handsome Hour, talked about it on Twitter. Last time Purdue played Indiana State, I believe, was when Hazel was coaching, or Hope. It was Hope. When Hope was coaching them, and Indiana State almost beat Purdue at Ross-Ade. It took a Ricardo Allen interception to seal the game. And Indiana State had a running back that was running all over Purdue that day. He was a big back. He was pretty hyped. I don't know if Indiana State has a weapon like that. I haven't heard anybody talking about that. Maybe somebody can clue me in if you want to in the margins here. If you know something about your Sycamores, let me know. But Greg McManus is watching live. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Also, Greg, don't think I didn't notice that you thought the Handsome Hour was a little late. You are correct. It was a little late. It's a lot late, actually, to record that time. The problem we've got is probably what a lot of you guys have out there. A lot of kids stuff, kids activities for the people that are on Boiled Sports. This past, was it Wednesday when we recorded? Tuesday? Whenever it was. A couple days ago. It's just like that. I think it was Tuesday. It doesn't matter. But I've got a ton of kids stuff to attend to. I know Michael does too. Anish is the only one without that excuse right now. But I'm sure he's busy as well. Jay couldn't even make it. He was up in a plane. So, but I screwed that up. I tried to get on. I was ready to get on at about 9:20, 9:25, and I had major tech problems. I could not get the computer and the website that we host our QuickCast on to talk to each other. Couldn't get video and audio to work. It was a big pain. Anyway, let's get back to the thing. Sorry about that. Just sidebar. Greg, it's okay. You don't need to apologize. Giving a hard time is a good thing. We appreciate it. So let me talk a little bit about our Boilers first. Here's what Purdue needs to do, really. They need to handle their business, right? They need to get a lot better on defense, wrap Indiana State up, make sure the defensive backs are making all the tackles specifically. The DBs, although they look pretty good in coverage versus Penn State, looked really, really lackluster tackling. And it wasn't just one guy, it was multiple players. I think there's some funny statements that I've read between the lines that are kind of good by the coaches. One of them says, if you eliminate 5 or 6 plays, Purdue played a near perfect game on defense. But if you include those 5 or 6 plays, Purdue played a really, really bad defensive game. If you just look at those, because those were chunk plays where they did it on special teams too. Purdue just wasn't wrapping up. And I would say, get a wrestling coach out there or something. Get back to the basics and have these guys wrap up and drive through the player they're tackling. Pretty simple stuff. I do think it's curable. I think they will look better this week. The other thing, they've got to clean up the penalties. Every time it seemed like Purdue got a penalty last week, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, they were important and they kept Penn State drives going. So I look for that big improvement on the defensive side of the ball. I think Purdue will look better because they're going to be in position a lot more. Penn State will give teams fits this year because of their athleticism on the defensive side of the ball. Or on offensive side of the ball and defensive side of the ball. But specifically, Purdue was out of position a lot, so they had to do some things they probably didn't want to do. Penn State, I think, kind of took it to Purdue, and Purdue paid for it in the form of 9 penalties. But anyway, Purdue still should win. Let's talk a little bit about the offense. What some news that's interesting from composite of. Oh, let me say one more thing. Ron English had a very good after practice interview. I think it was on Wednesday or Tuesday. And if you took anything away from it, Ron English is a former head coach, didn't have a great time as a head coach, but I love him as a coordinator. And he's so damn honest. He's the exact opposite of Jeff Braum in a interview because he just lets it fly. And he was not happy with his defense. So if you guys weren't happy, I know I wasn't super happy with what I saw. We're just hacks. We're just fans, but neither was Purdue's defensive coordinator. And I don't think I saw a Hagan interview this week, but I guarantee he was just as angry as English. So I think that is a good sign for Purdue. Those guys, I bet they made it pretty difficult for our Boilermakers in practice this week. Okay, on the offensive side of the ball, Kenyon and Yassine are both not available. Yassine is still recovering, I think from last year's stuff, but he's getting really close to playing. And Kenyon has a knee issue, and I don't really understand when that happened or what the problem is. I haven't seen a formal ruling of how long he'll be out. But Kenyon was targeted, I think, twice last week. He had no catches, but there was a big pass interference by Penn State on that play. It's a really good opportunity for Sheffield and Rice, I think, to really put themselves in a good position to be starting much of the season if they can these next 2 weeks make some noise. Also, I think you're going to see some things from Tracy. I'm putting some things together. I think Braum wants to have a good time with some play calling this week. I think he tends to be looser versus opponents that he thinks that they have an advantage from an athleticism standpoint or a scheme standpoint. I think he feels that Purdue should have that advantage, so I think you could see some fun play calling. So if you need another reason to watch, I know if you're watching this, you're probably diehard, so you probably don't need a reason to watch, but the play calling should be fun. And I think how that translates, one big thing is you may see Tyrone Tracy get the ball more in some different ways. I would hope we'd see him on a jet sweep or two to loosen things up. But I think he'll be used a lot. I think Dion Burks, Dion Burks could be on the field more because he's another speed guy. I've heard he's been looking good in practice. I would love to see Steptoe get into this game too, but really Braum hasn't given us any indicator that's going to happen. On the defensive side, again, Nick Carraway made a big impact. He's going to play a lot this week, and he's been really, really regular part of the ones and twos during practice. Interesting side note, just like the offensive line, the defensive line is going 12 men are playing in a rotation. That's really, really promising for the long haul. It's really, really good to see. I think Purdue's big goal, of course, should be to come away with a win on Saturday. Second, come away without any injuries. Hope they can do that. I got to see something pretty interesting. Somebody on Golden Black pointed, there's a guy named RJ Young who does a a video every week about college football, and he talked about Charlie Jones specifically, and it was very funny. He named him one of the I think his top 5 dudes, and he was number 2. Charlie Jones did some things last week that are reminiscent of a lot of different Purdue players in the deep past. If you're an old guy like me, or in the recent past, one thing he did that was a lot like David Bell was Penn State knew he was going to get the ball. They knew that he was being targeted, and he still made catches. If you look at a lot of the catches he made, they're in traffic. He had to go up and get them. He was coming down with the ball, did a really, really good job with that. I think he can get on a gallop this week, and maybe we'll see something really fun. He's really electric in the open field, and we saw none of that last week. I think you might see that in multiple places. I'm hoping he returns a punt for a touchdown, but I also think he could do something out in the open field. I think if Purdue gets a big lead, maybe they'll give him some rest. Brom talked about he was a little dinged up after the game. He was not used to taking that many hits, so they took it easy on him in practice for a couple days. I don't think he went through full practice for 2 days in practice, or during the week, sorry. So I think that's really cool that Jones is being noticed by a lot of people. R.J. Young called him white chocolate, and Iowa didn't even know he was there. And this guy, I mean, it was very funny just hearing him say, what we already knew, that Jones was kind of wasted last year. I would compare, you could compare Jones to a number of players, but I would say the Bell comparisons there, because of his importance in the offense last year, seem to be pretty obvious. And then you could say he looks a bit like a shorter John Standiford. And I'm trying to think, there's one other player that I was thinking of last week that reminded me of that. Darn it. I'll think of it later, and I'll come back to it. Anyway, another player that I thought it was neat in the Handsome Hour, Michael Henry talked about his player that he thinks is going to make a big difference and maybe player of the game was King Doru. That's neat for a couple reasons. Number one, Michael almost never has faith in the running game for Purdue, and I think Doru could be a really, really important game. If he goes over 100, that'd be awesome to see, just because Purdue doesn't do that very often, but I think it's very possible. I think Purdue's offensive line should be able to make a big push. But when you look at Indiana State on paper, this is one thing that's really interesting. You look at their offensive line, their depth, their size. They got a lot of 6'5" to 6'7" guys that are 300 pounds. So they're not like, these aren't tiny guys, but in person they might look a little bit different. Maybe they don't look like Purdue guys with the long arms and the athleticism. Who knows? Speaking of guys that are athletes on the offensive line, Mabo again was mentioned during some different things, and it sounds like he might have a chance to do some really creative things in different places. If you don't know it, I think Mabo came in at tight end for a couple downs, which is really, really cool. And maybe we'll see some creativity there. Who knows? Jeff Brom and his brother and the coaching staff are always good at finding wrinkles. I think they will this week. I'm going to look in the margin. Been on here for a little bit. Been on for 13 minutes. I don't think I thanked our sponsors. So let me do that real quick. If you're looking for a t-shirt, head over to Martin Vintage. Get some Purdue gear. They also have sweatshirts. Enter Boiled at checkout for 15% off. If you haven't heard that yet and you come on here, you haven't been paying attention at all. But good time I always like to reinforce my t-shirt collection in the fall. Things get torn up. I told you guys that during the Handsome Hour, some of my stuff has been put on lawn duty, which stinks when it's one you really like. Head over to Martin Vintage, get some new stuff. They do have some new stuff coming out soon though too. So if you're a regular customer. Also, if you're going to be on campus, head over to AJ's. I think I'm going to go there this week. My son has a cross-country meet. After the cross-country meet, we're heading straight west. We're going to be in Marion at a big multi-team meet. I don't know what time I'll be on campus, but I think when I get there, we're going to head over to AJ's, and we're going to try to see if we can see my pal Adam over there. And if you're there, maybe we can say hi. Okay, so I'm going to head over here to the questions here and comments, whatever, in the margin. Patrick Pence says Alabama paying almost $4 million for 2 guaranteed wins. So my $250,000 and $500,000 price tag is outdated. Clearly, Alabama paying $2 million a pop for FCS opponents is just incredible. Just incredible. So that's nuts. I don't think they play 2 FCS opponents, so they're playing probably a team like, I don't know, like Kent State and a team like Indiana State, somebody like that. That's a ton of money. And of course, they're paying that much now. TV dollars have gone up, so have those contracts. It's good for college football. So, anyway, Scott Justex says, great shows. Always have a great weekend. Boiler up. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for coming in live. Appreciate it. Luke, would love to see the pass rush flash this weekend. Need some confidence after that last week. Ended up putting a lot of pressure on DBs to hold the coverage. This is a tremendous point. It's something I don't think I talked about enough, but needs to be. We talked about a little bit on the Handsome Hour, but it really, really is important. They've got to generate a pass rush. Purdue has too many guys that I think are athletes to not generate a pass rush, and they simply didn't do it. It's way too much to ask defensive backs to hold coverage for, 4, 5, 6 seconds, and they had to. And when they did, they grabbed guys and drew the penalty. So excellent point. I think it's a big deal. Patrick Pence says, where's Yanni? From what I understand, he's healthy. I think we'll see him this week. Coaches sing his praises about his athleticism, and then it looks like a problem at times with athleticism at linebacker. I don't know. It seems like a dumb no-brainer to give him some playing time, especially this week. I think one problem he's not like his brother in that he was big right out of the box and had a body that was ready to go for Division I. Part of that's because of injury he had to go through. Other thing is he's built a little bit differently. But when I saw him last time, he still looked pretty thin, but he's very quick, they say. Very, very good in space, so why not? I look for a guy like Humpich to have a really big game, too, because he did a really good job versus Penn State. I think they could turn up the pressure with him, and like I said, Caraway could have a really good game. And if Yanni gets in there, who knows, maybe he can do something in space. We'll get to see something really exciting. I hope he gets a lot of playing time. He needs it because he hasn't been on the field very much in the last 2 years. Greg McManus says Jones goes up, gets the ball like Bell. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the high point idea, right? It's kind of a silly whenever somebody says high point because it's not the highest point of the arc of the ball. If you want to get really specific, real scientific, it's not the highest point. But you and I both know going to get to the highest point possible. Bell was good at that. And Jones is, of course, good at it. And I think Jones might be a little bit better athlete than Bell. It looks like he's quicker to me. But Bell, obviously, his route running was better than anybody we've ever seen at Purdue. And I mean that. That's incredibly high praise, and I think it's true. But Jones looks really precise, really good, really quick. Big Time Boiler, Grant, thanks for tuning in, says Purdue needs to run the ball a lot this week. Yes, they do, and that's really that King Doru portion. It was neat to see Downing last week. He looks like a different guy. He looks leaner all over. It's not just his midsection, and he showed it. He had one run where he kind of shifted his shoulders to avoid contact and then got to the second level where he was tackled. I cannot remember. I think it was on the left side of the field. But, yeah, I think Downing could be important. And maybe we'll get to see, darn nabbit, here I am with my names again, the transfer from Central Michigan. Maybe we'll get to see some work from him, too. It'd be great because they said he's been rusty. Be a good chance to tune up a little bit. Brock Stepler says this should be nothing other than a blowout. Let's go Boilers. Brock, I hope you're right. I think you're right, but I sure as hell hope Purdue isn't planning that way. It's always dangerous. I don't want to hear any bit of cockiness. One thing, I've heard a lot of things, listened to a lot of players this week. They sound like they're pretty mentally dialed in. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear guys that really aren't believing any of the press. And right now, there's not much press to believe. That Purdue, I said it off of the show that Purdue would be on rocket fuel if they would have beaten Penn State. Well, now they have a couple games where I think a lot of people are thinking, you should beat these teams, especially Purdue faithful. You should beat these next few teams. And a lot of the national media, if you don't beat them, it gets their attention. If you do beat them, nobody cares. So they're kind of in a lose-lose situation. But the good news is these are good games to get things really dialed in. And hopefully they do that, but I want them to come in humble and hungry. So, Big Time Boiler again says, dare I say Purdue rushes for over 200 yards? I think they should. That's a good point. Luke says, Yanni looked undersized, standing on the sideline. Could have been rough to throw him out there against Penn State. It would have been really rough to throw him out there versus Penn State. Penn State guys in person and on TV, I'm sure, looked big and fast. They are great athletes. They are... they've got, if you look at the recruiting rankings of those guys, they match the recruiting ranking with the eyeball test. So Penn State's legit good, talent-wise. Let's see, one more. Let's go one more. Brock Stepler says the way. Sorry, Brock Stepler says I'm all for it, and Big Time Bowler says Lewis, of course. Dag nabbit. Definitely want to see Lewis get some carries and Maccabee. Yeah, I'm really excited about those guys. I've talked about it a couple times. Thank you, Grant, for correcting me there. Appreciate it and reminding me. Lewis from Central Michigan and Maccabee, the walk-on. Both those guys have some really, really big upside, some really big potential to do some things, and I'd love to see 4 running backs play. That'd be great to see. So thanks for everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate it. It's tough on these days. I literally was trying to scour some information, try to find 2 deeps and stuff like that from Indiana State. It's hard to find that information, so I kind of cobbled some things together. But I think the big thing, just like me, Purdue needs to look at itself before they look at their opponent and just play their game and play it well. Get some things cleaned up, and I think they could, and they should. And 4 o'clock kickoff tomorrow. Hope to see you there up in God's country. If you don't have tickets yet, they're $15 through Purdue Sports. You should do it. Just because it's a lesser opponent doesn't mean you shouldn't be there. Don't make that excuse. Let's go. Hammer down. Talk to you soon. God bless you. We'll see you later.